Many of you have actually pointed out that we have a few more episodes of the Smash Infection AU. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and go over what's happening in each of the new episodes, connect them to the overall lore, and give my theories about the series. Now, the first new chapter is called Confuser, and it picked up from the point where Mewtwo is being stabbed by Pichu, and it is actually really sad seeing Mewtwo crying on the ground here. And it's obvious that he's crying because he knows that he cannot escape the infection at this point. He's been stabbed way too many times. And then that fact is confirmed when we see that he no longer has the question mark over his face, but it's just straight up purple now, which means that he's infected. After that scene, we see that Ness and the gang have found Dr. Mario's lab, and we get a brief conversation between Ness and Dr. Mario, where the doc is kind of been a jerk, but I suppose that, it could be to the fact that he's under a lot of stress and the fact that like his original self is no longer among the living. So I guess we can cut the guy a little bit of slack. But after that conversation, he goes to find Rob and he notices that Mewtwo is gone. And this is where everything starts to go wrong. The first thing that we see is Rob being broken into bits, which sucks because he was one of the few characters that are immune to the virus. Next, we see Mewtwo cast Confuse Ray on the swordsman, which is why we see his eyes moving back and forth like this and then turning dark right before Mewtwo sends a tentacle through his skull. And it looks like Mewtwo was trying to do the same thing to Ness, but Cappy was actually able to help him avoid the attack. Then we see everybody start to scramble away, and Dr. Mario gets separated from the rest of the team, and he ends up back in the operating room where they worked on Olimar. And as if this situation wasn't bad enough already, it looks like the infected characters become very resilient once they get to the later stages of the infection. So while Mario thought that Olimar was no longer living, it seemed like he was wrong, and that miscalculation may have cost him his life. We see that he basically got caught between three infected: Olimar, Pichu, and Mewtwo. And just a little side note here, it even looks like Mewtwo and Pichu may have fused together to make themselves even more powerful. And if that is foreshadowing what the infection can do overall, that is going to be bad news for a lot of our characters. Now, something that people pointed out is that when Dr. Mario gets taken out, everyone seems to be shocked except for Marth. And people think that this is because he has something to do with the infection. But I want to remind people that while most of the Smash characters have been in combat, Marth is one of the few that have actually fought in a war. The Shadow War, to be specific. And if I remember correctly, his sister even gave herself up as like a prisoner of war to keep him and their people safe. And I say all that just to say that, in a sense, it makes sense that he would be a bit more callous than some of the other characters on the team, especially like Ness and the Villager. And obviously, after watching this episode, I think it's safe to say that my theory about Dr. Mario being the main villain was probably wrong, unless the description of the video here is actually talking about him when it says he is lying. He wouldn't lie either. He doesn't know. But she might have suspected it from the beginning. And honestly, this description is a bit too vague for us to get any real meaning from it. But can we take a moment and just get some rips in the chat for Rob, Dr. Mario, and the swordsman? They went out pretty bad. The next episode is titled The Messenger, and as many people predicted, it features Pit and Lady Palutena, and she basically tells Pit that he needs to go back to the Smash universe and gather up every contestant and take them to the world of light, which in the original game is where you would go to face off against Gollum. And it seems like Lady Palutena wants to gather everyone there so that they have a chance to actually fight against the infection. But something seems a little bit off of her during this discussion, even though Pit doesn't seem to be able to recognize it. But after she tells him about Mega Man and where to find him, we then see that she is at stage 4 of the virus. And I have a couple of theories about this. We know that Ness has theorized that there is a stage 4 of the virus, even though they hadn't actually seen it at this point. But I think once the infection gets to this point, characters are able to mask the fact that they are infected. We have seen that the infected characters can still think and kind of scheme, like when Pichu actually played dead so that he could roam around Dr. Mario's lab, or when Mewtwo specifically targeted Ness out of all the people in his group. I don't think it was actually by chance that Mewtwo went after the leader of the group. I think he understood that Ness was a threat and he wanted to get him out of there. Now, another possible theory as well is that Palutena is an actual god and is very powerful. So she may just be able to fight off the infection better than some of the other characters. But even with all that power, she is still slowly being taken over, which is why she makes sure to send Pit on a mission so that he's not actually there when she turns. Because realistically, when you consider that Pit was struggling to fight against Link, I don't think that he could actually fight against an infected Palutena. especially if she infects her army as well. That would pretty much be GG for everybody. Next in the animation, we see that Pit found Mega Man, and the first thing that I notice is that he actually has a crack in his helmet, and then he turns around and we see that he seems to be missing one of his eyes. And a lot of people think that this means that Mega Man is infected, and I can understand why people may think that. Mega Man is a really old character, and a lot of people don't actually know much about him, so they think that he's like part human, but in actuality, he is a complete android. So he falls into the same category as Rob in a way, which means that the infection cannot get to him, cannot harm him in any way. What is much more likely to have happened to him is that he was probably fighting against somebody that was infected, which would make more sense, because while Mega Man is strong in his own right, he definitely is not like a top tier person in this universe. So I can imagine a few people that will really be able to bang him up pretty good. The only thing that gives me pause about this situation is that Lady Palutena says sorry to Pit right before she sends him to Mega Man, almost as if she's setting Pit up in a way. But it also could just be interpreted that she's sorry that she ended up getting corrupted in the first place, and she's kind of sad that she won't be able to help Pit out moving forward, because we all know that Lady Palutena was basically like his trump card. She was always helping him from the background, if not directly, and now she knows that she won't be able to do that because she's actively like losing the ability to control herself basically. And a lot of people pointed out that there's also some lines in the descriptions that really stood out, and they read like this: "Why do they have to suffer as much as you do? I know it wasn't your intention. Was it your fault though? You certainly think it is, don't you? This isn't part of your imagination. They are not real, right? But you are, and you can't let yourself be consumed by whatever horror you created. You created them." Now, when I first read this, I thought that it was referring to like the real life player, or maybe the Smash creators, or like a modder. But a person named Basefish on TikTok confirmed that the creator has said that that theory is not correct. Meaning that whatever is going on here is happening specifically in the Smash universe, meaning that the characters are not being controlled in any way. They are fully autonomous, which makes what's going on here a lot harder to figure out because we don't really have a whole lot of solid hints as to who could have started this. Now, the final new chapter gives us some more of Ness's notes and informs us of what he and his team did after the demise of Dr. Mario, or the seeming demise of Dr. Mario. We learn that Ness and the others went back to the villagers' home so that they could actually read Ness's notes and compare them with Dr. Mario so that they get more information. And while we don't learn a whole lot of new stuff here, considering that we have actually gotten to see both Ness's notes and Dr. Mario's notes the whole time, so we kind of know more than they did individually. But they do confirm that the infection spreads faster if a person is panicking or if their sanity is already low. And the notes also confirm that the infected targets are able to maintain their intelligence even in the later stages of the infection, meaning that they can still their hunger or their need for violence long enough to actually craft a plan to attack their foes, which in my opinion is what really makes this infection more dangerous than a lot of other infections. Usually as people get deeper into the infected stages, they start to lose their mind, their ability to think, right? They become like mindless animals. And in this AU, that is not the case. It almost seems like they get smarter and more crafty as they get deeper into the infection, which kind of shows us that this infection may be sentient and like very intelligent in some way or another. It almost feels like this infection is some type of parasite or brain worm that takes over the person's body and then is able to like control it and move it to their will while the person is still inside, able to see what's going on, but they can't actually do anything to stop themselves. Now, the ending of this animation is the most interesting part for me because we see the words, "Why am I still alive?" pop up on the screen. And while at first I thought that it was the sword fighter talking, I quickly realized that it was actually Dr. Mario speaking. And then we get to see this image of him with tears in his eyes, very beat up, but most importantly, alive. And then we see this leg come into view, and while it's hard to say for sure who it is, I think that this is Banjo and Kazooie, with it being Banjo's leg specifically. And this is somewhat confirmed when we see Banjo's picture actually pop up on the character screen here. And while Banjo and Kazooie may not be the most powerful characters to come into this verse, at this point, Dr. Mario can use whatever help he can get. Something else that stood out here is that we see that Mega Man's picture is still lit up and he seems to be fine. So we know for sure now that he may be injured, but he's not dead or infected. Dr. Mario picture shows up here as well, and I was surprised to see that he is also not infected, but unfortunately, the sword fighter was not as lucky and did fall victim to the infection, but I don't think anybody's surprised about that. The last thing that I want to point out on this page is that Marth seems to be turning purple a little bit, and my eyes are not as young as they used to be, so maybe some of y'all can confirm this for me, but I'm pretty sure that it has a slight tint of purple to it. And I think that this means that when they cut off his hand, it maybe just slowed the infection, but it didn't actually stop it from spreading. And I made a joke in my first video saying it was very Walking Dead style, but that may actually be more accurate than I thought it was. Because I don't know if y'all played the Telltale Walking Dead game, but when they chopped off Lee's hand, they thought that it might stop the infection, but it didn't. It just slowed it down a little bit. And I think that this is how this virus works as well. And just a quick side note, I know a lot of people had questions about the lyrics in the description here because usually they are like some type of cryptic puzzle or something, but I think that these lyrics are actually just from the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate theme. If I remember correctly, the song is called Lifelight. And now that we looked at the new chapters, I have a few theories as to what is happening here. And I think it's clear that Dr. Mario isn't behind this virus. I say this because I don't see a way that he would actually benefit from taking out his original self, and it also seems like the infected made a point of getting into his lab so that they could take him out. Most likely because he was the one that created a way to slow down, if not just straight up stop the infection altogether. If you guys remember from previous chapters, the only reason that the cure didn't fully work on Olimar is because there were infected Pinkmen inside of his guts, basically eating him. And as to why he was allowed to live at the end, I think that Mewtwo probably teleported away after Dr. Mario was seriously damaged and passed out. As we've seen with Lady Palutena, the infected seems to be able to fight back against the virus some of the time, and I think Mewtwo is one of those people who probably has enough willpower to where he was able to spare Dr. Mario. Because if you remember in that first tape, Mewtwo was crying because he realized that he was going to be infected. There was nothing that he could do to stop Pichu. So I think that he's leaving Dr. Mario to live so that he can possibly get a cure. Kind of like in the same way that Lady Palutena was able to keep herself in check long enough to send away Pit so that he would not get caught up in her infection. Now, as far for who's responsible for actually starting the virus, it's really hard to say. Based on some of the text, we know that it's likely a man that started the virus, and for some reason, a lot of people in the community are thinking that it might be Link, and the woman who knew about it is Zelda or Sheik. But that theory doesn't really make sense to me because Zelda or Link wouldn't have any reason to set a virus out on this community. I've also seen people throw Hades' name in there and Sephiroth, but again, neither one of these characters has a reason to use a virus. Hades is from Pit's universe and he is very powerful in his own right, top 3 powerful. And Sephiroth, I don't need to say how strong he is. So I don't feel like either one of those fools would use a virus to get their dirty work done. They would just go in there and just whoop tail themselves. But one thing that I do feel confident in saying for sure is that even when a lot of these people get infected, they still seem to have their mind there, even if they can't fully control themselves or their thoughts. And I'm hoping that in later chapters we see that play more of a role. But as of right now, we'll just have to wait for those later chapters to see if we can get some more information. Go ahead and put your theories down in the comments and we'll make sure to continue following this AU. I know the creator is taking a bit of a break right now, but once he comes back, I will jump back on and see what he produces, because I am very curious to see where this goes next. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe to Did We Become a Member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you tomorrow with another video. Peace, peace.